Welcome to Innovate Presents Entrepreneurs in Tech. Today, we're delighted to have our guest, Jeff D. Standridge, who is the Managing Director of Innovation Junkie. Jeff, thank you for joining us today. Could you please
Bob,
start
great
by
to be here.
introducing yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Could you please start by introducing yourself and providing insights on your background and your, should I say, a list of expertise?
Sure. I have a career, first of all, in healthcare. So I spent a number of years in healthcare. I was formerly trained as a paramedic and a respiratory therapist. Spent about 9 years on the helicopter team at Arkansas Children's Hospital as medical crew. And then 6 of which I was a professor at the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. Got a degree, a graduate degree in organizational behavior. That took me out of healthcare into the publicly traded world of business,
Mhm.
particularly in data analytics. I ran global operations there for a number of years. So I came to the world of innovation entrepreneurship from that of being an entrepreneur. So kind of an entrepreneur within the safety net of a corporate salary and a change agent, a kind of a organizational change agent. Spent 20 years with them, traveled all over the world, started companies in Poland, China, acquired companies in Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and throughout Europe. And about 8 years ago, I left to start an entrepreneurial support organization, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, called the Conductor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then that evolved into creating a venture fund called Cadron Capital Partners and an innovation and strategic growth consultancy called Innovation Junkie. And that's where I am today.
Wow, amazing. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. This is going to be extremely insightful and exciting with Jeff. Jeff, if we go back a bit, back in your early days, I would say teenage, what really kind of got you set up to say, hey, I want to get involved in the healthcare? That's what you started, obviously.
Mhm.
And what made you carve that path, take that path and say, was it influence family, friends, or just something that you were inspired and say, hey, this is the path I want to take and this is where I want to go?
I wish I could tell you that it was much more noble than it was. But I grew up in very rural South Arkansas, a community of 1,200 people, 28 in my graduating class. First generation college student. I moved 2 hours away to go to the University of Central Arkansas, go Bears. And I was an undeclared major. I went on a music scholarship, and but I thought I was going to be a finance major. And I took an intro to finance and economics class and made the only D I've ever made in my life. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll be a music major. I'm here on a music scholarship. I'm a band player, play a low brass instrument. Maybe I was meant to be a music major. And I
Uh-huh.
did that for a couple of semesters until we all figured out that I wasn't particularly talented. I just worked hard. And that's why I was good on one instrument, but I didn't have the talent to pick up all the others that are required with a music degree. So
Amazing.
my sophomore year in college, I actually walked away from my music scholarship and started working full time as an EMT, an emergency medical technician.
Hmm.
And and I really loved the work and made a decision to get a degree in respiratory therapy and ultimately become a paramedic, precisely because I wanted to work on the helicopter team at Arkansas Children's Hospital, which is exactly what I did.
Why did
And
you want to work in a helicopter team? Did you
because
just
it was
like
sexy, man. I mean, it was
being in a helicopter?
yeah, I mean, you fly all over the state, you pick up sick kids, and everybody thinks you're a hero. And I mean, it's a heroic job. It really is. But I figured out that there was more out there. I enjoyed the work for a period of time, particularly as a young single man. But when I got married, and by the way, my wife was a flight nurse, and we started talking about family and kids, it wasn't as appealing. And so I knew I'd always had this idea of business,
Mhm.
and got that degree in organizational behavior, and it kind of evolved into this career with a non-medical company. And now I consult with healthcare companies, and I'm on the board of that health system that I started working at my sophomore year in college. But yeah, it was just more of an evolution than a revolution, I guess.
What an amazing path. Um, Jeff, you were a professor
Hmm.
and also you played two roles. A professor, also you were in the helicopter team.
Hmm.
How did that shape your business career
Hmm.
and your vision for your career in the future?
Sure. again, it evolved over time, but I'll tell you what was really the pivot point, if you will, is,
Please.
whenever you go to graduate school, you have to immerse yourself in some research, and to get a doctorate, you have to do a doctoral dissertation. And as a member of the helicopter team and as a professional in the respiratory therapy profession and the association, at 26, I was actually president of the state association of respiratory therapists. And I began to observe, both as a professor and a practitioner, there were people who would graduate my classes and make straight A's, yet they struggled to be successful in the real world, couldn't hold a
Hmm.
job, some of them. Others might barely get by, as we say, by the skin of their teeth, making straight C's, yet they would pass the credentialing exam. And many of them I know that are still in the profession today, almost 40 years later.
Mm.
And so that intrigued me. What is it that differentiates success? It's clearly not academic credentials. And so I was studying the differences between top performers and middle performers. So top 10% versus middle 50%. Now that
Yeah.
middle 50%, they're not losers. They're not unsuccessful. The vast majority of the working world is made up of these middle 50%. But what's the difference between them and top performers? And so that research led me to pursue, that led me to the job at the technology company that wanted to replicate that research, not with healthcare
Hmm.
professionals, but with software engineers, database administrators. And then the executive, the CEO, and the number two there at that company saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself. And they started putting me in situations as a utility player, like sending me to the UK for 18 months,
Hmm.
asking me to project manage, 20, the acquisition of 21 companies in 7 countries,
Amazing.
starting a company in Poland and China, et cetera. And that just evolved into something where I figured
What
that I was really in my calling, so to
what
speak.
what kind of companies you started in China and in Poland, like in Europe and all the way to Asia?
Yep. So they were subsidiaries of this company that I was working for at the time, this publicly traded company called Axiom Corporation. We first of all acquired 21 companies across 7 countries, and I went to do due diligence and then kind of lead the acquisition integration. And I started while I was living in the UK, having a difficult time keeping software engineers in
Yeah.
in our company. So I went over to our Polish office in Warsaw and started hiring English speaking Polish developers to support our business there. And then over time, ended up spinning those out and creating a separate company specifically to support our European business. And then
Amazing.
after I did that, I went to China and did the same thing.
So you grew Axioms. Am I pronouncing it right?
Axiom.
Axiom. Okay,
Mhm.
Axiom. You grew Axiom to to a mid-market presence of $75 million. What
Yeah. So
strategies did you use? Is it expanding? Is the expansion that what grew the company to that
Well,
level?
so just to be clear, the company was $1 billion company,
Mm.
and so after I created those global service centers in Poland, China, and led some other acquisitions in Saudi Arabia, Brazil, I came back to the U.S. and led a North American sales team that was focused on taking Axiom's products and services that really were focused on the Fortune 1000 and
Hmm.
bringing those down to the mid market and the small business market. And that's what we ended up growing from, just a nascent group of resellers and what have you, to both a direct sales force and an indirect sales force to 75, $80 million over time.
Amazing. I'm still impressed. I always get baffled. I call it silent wealth. There's so many companies here in America.
Mm-hmm.
You will never heard of them.
Yeah.
You don't even know whether if they exist or not.
Mm-hmm.
And they're worth, if some of them are hundreds of millions of dollars, some of them worth billions of dollars.
For sure.
Amazes me. Really amazes me. Unbelievable. I call it silent wealth.
Yeah, that's a great description for it.
Yes, yes. What was your main goals of as a managing director with Conductor in
Yeah.
Arkansas?
So 8 years ago, I left to start an entrepreneurial support organization, which we call the Conductor, and
Mm.
it is based here in Central Arkansas. It's partnered with a group up in Northwest Arkansas called Startup Junkie, and effectively we are what we call an entrepreneurial support organization that secures third-party sources of funding so that we can grow the economy of Arkansas through entrepreneurship by providing free coaching, consulting, mentoring, training, access to capital, connection to industry, and what have you. And
Mm.
so we've been doing that for about 8 years. We have a co-working space. We run an accelerator, and everything that we do for those entrepreneurs, if they are in the state of Arkansas below, let's call it $5 million of annual revenue,
Uh-huh.
is free with no strings attached.
Hmm.
And so our goal is to generate more startup activity and to drive more economic development benefit for our state through entrepreneurship, paralleled with what's more traditional economic development, which is about recruiting companies to relocate to your geography.
Amazing. How does Innovation Junkie executives grow their businesses effectively?
So after a period of years of running Startup Junkie and Conductor together to do funded or sponsored support of entrepreneurs, we started having a number of larger companies that didn't qualify for those funded services, not just in Arkansas, but from around the world, coming to us and saying, we need some of the same kinds of services that you provide through Conductor Startup Junkie, but we know we don't qualify for those services, but we'll pay you. And so we created Innovation Junkie in 2020, January 2020, as a separate kind of sister company that's really a billable consulting firm. And our business there is focused on, those 20 to 250, even 5 to $500 million companies. So we do everything we do is focused on innovation, challenging the status quo and doing things differently, creating sustained strategic growth, and bringing the executives and their executive teams along to help cultivate that growth.
Amazing. Um, let's talk about growth DX
Mm-hmm.
and, and the diagnostic instrument that you developed,
Yep.
for strategic growth,
Sure.
please.
So Growth DX is a diagnostic instrument that we use in our Innovation Junkie practice predominantly. We use it with Conductor clients, larger Conductor clients as well. But effectively, you have the senior executive team of a company. You leverage theoretically the top experts in the company, those who are responsible for executive leadership, could be 5 to 7 to 12 or 15 members of that company, to
Yes.
evaluate the company on 75 best practices that are categorized into 7 different diagnostic domains.
Mm.
And those diagnostic domains are things like revenue velocity, which is the speed, power, and effectiveness of the sales, marketing, and messaging efforts. Organizational effectiveness, the degree to which there is a crystal clear plan for growth and execution systems around that plan. Operational effectiveness, how good are we at actually delivering our products and services to our clients and operating the business effectively. Leadership effectiveness, which is about the leadership climate and the quality of leadership that we have. Um, uh, Innovation readiness. Innovation readiness is what processes do we have in place to challenge the status quo and to constantly pursue excellence and getting better. Digital readiness, which is about the use of the data and digital technologies that we have at our disposal to run a better business. And then finally, the financial disciplines. How mature are the financial disciplines in the company? So we do that assessment across those senior leaders. We put together a report. We create a heat map. We also create more of a detailed analysis, and we actually tie some financial projections to, if they were to close the gap on some of these major areas of deficiency, what kind of profits might be locked up in their business that they could unleash.
Just one question. How the hell in the world did you make that switch mentally and visually from being a paramedic in a helicopter, working there for years, to become a strategist for helping corporation and growth? And that involves numbers, math, finance. You need
Yeah.
to understand all of this. And what are you doing? I know it's all about a mindset, but still, it's not something like somebody playing a guitar and the next thing you say, I'm a great chef. I'm going to,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well,
how did you?
I kind of rely on the adage that says nobody sees the 20 years of hard work that goes into being an overnight success.
Yes.
I made a D in that first class in finance and economics, but that didn't mean I didn't have the financial acumen, or I didn't have the underlying talent So now, for the last 6 years, I have taught entrepreneurial finance at the same university where the only
Hmm.
course I ever took at that university, I received a D on in business. And so, over the years, I was surrounded by people who saw things in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And they put me into situations that required me to grow, to develop, to improve, and I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had all of those experiences, both good and bad, both the failure or the D in finance and economics to the, some of the failures in business. I lost my first business when I was 24 years of age, and spent the next 10 years kind of paying out from under the debt to take care of that. And that led me then to where I am today. So it's a combination of all of those factors.
Well, you said something earlier in the conversation. You said something about when you were in music school, you took 2 semesters. You said, hey, I realized I wasn't talented, but it was my hard work, but I
Mhm.
work hard. And I
Yeah.
think that's the
Yeah.
main factor. That's
Sure.
90%, if even 90, I would say 90% of success.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Showing up and doing the work.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jeff, years of experience and combined, with your partner's Innovation Junkie, how did that benefit your client with all these years of experience that you have?
So my colleagues and partners and I at Innovation Junkie, we're not just consultants. We
Yes.
have been operators. We have been founders. We and are operators and founders. We're investors. We're advisors and board members on a variety of different companies. And so we bring all of those collective 75 plus years of experience and capabilities and what have you
Yes.
to our CEO clients and their executive teams. And it brings a degree of credibility because we've walked a mile in their shoes. It's one thing to be an academic expert and to step into companies and give them expert academic guidance and leave it to them to figure out how to apply it. We don't come in academically at all. We come in with very practical, real world examples, and you can even hear it in our words. When I was only an academic, I would
Hmm.
say things like, well, the research suggests or the research shows. Now, when I'm working with companies, and for the last 2 decades as I've worked with companies, my language is much different. It's, well, I've seen this happen. In my experience, this is the right way to go. If I were you, I would consider this, this, or this because of these reasons. And that's the practical guidance and expertise that we bring. In addition to the fact that we bring a systematic growth process to help our clients achieve that sustained growth versus a 3-ring binder with a strategic plan that nobody looks at. We actually wrap an execution system around it.
Hmm. Um, One of your offerings, something really intriguing. It's called
Mhm.
Sales Acceleration Workshop.
Mhm.
Can you please tell us more about it and how and why it's impactful?
Sure.
Why? Yeah.
So, spent a number of years in sales myself, and I was on a podcast earlier today about sales, and it's just so interesting how badly sales is often done and how it usually doesn't require big, massive changes in a salesperson's techniques or a sales organization's processes. I kind of liken it to a horse race. In one of the Triple Crown races, I don't remember which one it was. It was a photo finish. Generally, you don't have a horse win a race by a horse length. They win by a nose,
Mm.
and that's the same way in sales. We just have to win by a nose, and sometimes it just requires some tweaks to what we're doing. And so we end up assessing with our sales acceleration workshop. We do some front end assessment with the sales team, with the sales leaders, and then we come in and we focus on those 2 or 3 or 4 things that they need to do differently than what they're doing today to drastically improve their sales metrics and their sales results.
Hmm.
And that's why we call it a sales acceleration workshop. Or sprint in some instances. It's a 1-day event in most instances, maybe a day and a half. It has very practical guidance. It's theory light and practicality heavy. And so we might finish a session on how to generate referrals. And then we might put them in a room next door and say, get out your phones and call your top clients and see, and whoever wins the most referrals gets $100.
You know, you're involved in sales. Sales is everything.
Mhm.
Something I've been coming across and noticing that, I come across a lot of young startups, and a lot of them, the CEOs or the founders of these startups, usually one or two people, are, you know, great ideas. Some of them are engineers,
Mhm.
software engineers, able to build the technology. But I noticed nobody wants to do the hard work,
Mhm.
which is marketing, sales, and penny crunching,
Mhm.
which is bootstrapping.
Mhm.
Everybody just want money to be given to them. And I said, everybody, it's easy to spend money, easy to hire people. It's
Mhm.
about holding on to the money.
Mhm.
And if there's no money, what would you do? You
Mhm.
just close or you bootstrap it. But
Yeah,
again, sales is everything.
it is everything.
Creating partnership, being in the marketplace, and that even more value than anything. That's what's going to create the value for your idea, for your startup.
Mhm.
But why a lot of new, I don't want to say young because entrepreneurs could be any age. Why new entrepreneurs with new startups, they stay away and they shy away from doing the sales. But without it, there's no startup.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter how great the idea
that's
is.
right. That's right. I say that nothing happens until somebody sells something, and
Yes.
everybody in the
I like
organ.
that.
Yeah,
Nothing happens until somebody sells. I
and
love it. It's
everyone
very
in
simple. It's
yeah,
so simple, but it's
exactly right,
effective. It's actually the point.
for
Yes.
sure. And everybody in the organization needs to understand that
Yes.
the penny counter, the bean
Yeah.
counter in the back room,
Yes.
or the person on the customer service calls, or the person writing the code, they don't have a job
Without
if there's
sales.
not
No.
revenue coming in the door from sales. So nothing happens until somebody sells something.
Yes.
And so what I've seen with a lot of tech oriented companies is they try to scale their sales and marketing process before they even have figured out why clients buy. And so, we like to suggest that you need to do what doesn't scale, start by doing what doesn't scale, figure out your client acquisition process, why your clients buy, what's the proper price point, what's the selling process, what's the customer journey, and knowing that you're not going to be able to scale it, do what doesn't scale, then back up and figure out how to re-engineer it so that it can scale. But you can't step away from the responsibility and the fact that nothing happens until somebody sells something.
$1 million advice to grow a startup. Absolutely. Amazing. Amazing, Jeff. How can an organization adopt think like a startup mindset for growth?
Yeah, that's what actually led to our innovation junkie brand. Is we have these
Mm,
companies coming to us saying, look, we've gotten away from the fundamentals. We don't think like a small nimble company anymore. We're acting like a big bureaucratic organization. And so, the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of startups that
mm.
fail because of one major reason, and it's because they create a product or a service that no one wants. And we believe that the process of innovation, our experience is the process of innovation is what separates those founders that succeed from those founders that don't. And that can be applied in a larger company as well. And what I mean by that is there's a very specific process, a scientific process, so to speak, to innovation. One must first start with being crystal clear about the problem you're trying to solve or
Hmm.
the opportunity that you're trying to seize. So
Yeah.
we work with our founders and or our corporate executives when we're teaching innovation to step back and create a problem statement. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the opportunity you're trying to seize? Then we begin the process of quantitatively validating that, gathering some credible facts and statistics. Do the facts and statistics agree with our assumption of what is the problem or what is the opportunity? And if the facts and statistics agree, then we go on and start to qualify that problem statement by doing some customer discovery, talking with people who will be the grand beneficiaries of whatever our solution might be. And we find that when we do the quantitative validation and the qualitative validation, we find that about 60% of our assumptions about the underlying problem or opportunity are accurate, which means about 40% are misplaced. They're inaccurate. So we have to pivot that problem to make sure that before we start designing a solution, we know precisely what the problem is we're trying to solve with that solution and what the key outcomes that we're looking to present or create with that solution. And there's a lot of customer validation that goes into the process. And so getting organizations, me having worked in $1 billion company, I can't tell you the number of times that someone came up with a great idea, and then there were throngs of people put behind that idea to execute against it, only to figure out 6 months down the road that they weren't solving a big enough problem. Nobody
Mm.
took the time to really home in on what's the problem they're trying to solve. And so they end up killing and losing all of that sunk cost that they had wasted.
That's how a lot of money get wasted in time
For
and
sure.
effort in big corporation.
Mhm.
Yes. You developed something called, or a framework called the culture of excellence.
Mhm.
Please tell us about it,
Sure.
Jeff.
So as we have worked with companies large and small, and over the course of my career and my observations and my colleagues' observations as well, we have found that there are 6 things that organizations do very, very well, that leaders of those organizations cultivate,
Hmm.
and that those organizations execute on that result in sustainable outcomes, which we've begun to describe as the culture of excellence. If you ask people what culture is, if you would have asked a group of executives 40 years ago what culture was, they would say it's something the HR department does, or they would say that it's all fluff. Now, I think there's a growing reality. Even Peter Drucker said culture will eat strategy for breakfast. That if we don't manage our culture effectively, we're
Yes.
going to fail to produce the consistent outcomes that we're looking for. So those 6 elements that make up the framework of the culture of excellence are strong leadership, clarity and focus. So we know where we're going as an organization. We know how we're going to get there. And we've got strong leadership who are bought into the direction and are willing to execute against that. We've got engaged and committed teammates. So we've got people that are in the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats, to use Jim Collins' terminology from good to great. We've got empowering communication that's happening on a consistent basis in our organization. And the word empower itself means to make someone confident, stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances they're facing. So communication that makes people confident in dealing with the challenges they're facing. We've got 100% accountability, where people's deeds match their words and their words match their deeds. They do what they say they're going to do. If they're committed to delivering something by noon on Thursday, they deliver it by noon on Thursday. If something happens to take that off track, they immediately go and talk to the person that's dependent upon them and say, hey, I'm in a challenge here. Is Thursday the drop dead for you, or can we flex a little bit? And then finally, the other management thinker I like to pay attention to is Mike Tyson, who said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that 6th element of the culture of excellence is organizational agility, the ability to be adaptable, the ability to be resilient, and to bounce back from unforeseen circumstances.
Very interesting. Really interesting. How do you balance your professional achievements with community involvement?
That's a great question, Bob. My wife would probably answer how well I do that differently than I would answer it. But you know, I am fortunate enough to live in a community. It's about 70,000 population. I have chaired the Chamber of Commerce here. I sit on the board of the Conway Economic Development Corporation, which is our economic development entity. I chaired the University Foundation Board for a number of years, and I now vice chair the hospital board. And I guess the way I would say that is 8 years ago, on my 50th birthday, I left my corporate career to do what I do today. And at that time, I told someone, I spent the first half of my life making a living. I want to spend the second half of my life making a difference. And so I don't really differentiate my work from my community involvement. I kind of see those as the same thing at this stage in my life. I'll be 58 in November. And my calling is to create new insights that inspire people to better ways of living and working. And I believe I can do that through my vocation, the way I earn my living, and I can do that through my community involvement as well. So I don't really see it as compartmentalized. I see it as a holistic approach to living my life. I also have 2 grandbabies that I spend a lot of time with.
Amazing. Bless. You're a blessed man.
Blessed for sure.
Definitely. And happy birthday.
Yeah,
Definitely.
thank you.
58 years younger, not older, younger.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff, I just want to go back to one thing. When we were talking about the culture of excellence, you mentioned something, accountability, and I do a lot of interviews, and that word's been coming up a lot. There's not enough accountability, I think, in the culture structure these days at a lot of the corporations.
Agree. I
Yeah,
agree with you. I agree with you.
yeah,
So when you define culture, it is everything that happens in an organization. A lot of people will say, well, it's our core values. Well, that's the way we communicate a portion of our culture, certainly. But it's also the unwritten norms, the unwritten behaviors, the habits of the organization, how process oriented we are or how non-process oriented we are. It's the feeling that I get on Sunday night when I'm preparing to go to work on Monday morning. That points to the culture. It's the feeling that I have when I get in my car on a Friday afternoon and get ready to drive home. That's the importance of culture.
Do you feel that there's a disconnect between the the upper level executive, and there's the mid management who really takes what the upper executive want and translate to, or should I say, transform it to the, the kind of, how should I say this, upper, middle,
Yep.
and the working, the majority of the working employees.
Yeah.
Do you
In,
think
in
there's
many,
a disconnect and always the mid management get blamed and they're the first one to get fired always?
No, I don't think so. I think so. In every organization that I've worked with, there's what we call the espoused culture. That's the culture we say we have,
Yeah.
and then there's the actual culture we have. And in many organizations, in most organizations, those are not the same. Some months they're closer together, and some months they're further apart. In some geographies, if they have multiple locations, it might be further apart in this geography while it's closer together in this geography. The best organizations actively manage that gap and try to reduce that gap to the degree possible. And the way they do that is this. Once they articulate the desired culture of an organization by creating the core values, also the behavioral norms, they use that desired culture or that espoused culture they recruit and select people who are cultural matches for the organization. They use that documentation and descriptions of the culture to onboard them. They make sure that they're deeply educated on what the culture is. They use them to evaluate them on an annual basis, to train them, to coach them, and they're using the elements of that culture every day and how they coach people. And they use it to promote leaders within the organization. In other words, they promote leaders who embody that culture on a day-to-day basis. And finally, they have the intestinal fortitude to fire people who blatantly defy that culture on a regular basis. Organizations that do those 5 or 6 things have much more consistent cultures top to bottom throughout the organization than organizations who don't. If
Got
only the executive leadership is embodying the culture and living by the culture, it's really not the right culture. It's flawed.
You mentioned you were involved also in the healthcare or in
Mhm.
the beginning. Just a quick question without getting political. How would you change, or how would you like to see the healthcare system in America change? You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, how would you simplify it and say, you know what, I think the solution for this system to be that way, please.
I think that goes back to the degree of federal and state oversight, mainly federal oversight, the
Hmm.
Medicaid, Medicare kind of reimbursements, and how many of the private payers follow suit there.
Hmm.
The fact of the matter is the economics of healthcare don't really work right now. And, there's a disconnect where the CEO of a particular payer, say a United or a Blue Cross at the company or at the enterprise level, the national market CEO, they're making $20 million a year, and a hospital CEO is having a hard time keeping the doors open because 20% of their claims are being denied, or they haven't had an increase in rates in 15 years. And so there's just a big disconnect in between the payer system and the actual delivery of care. So the first thing that I would do is, is suggests some engagement at the U.S. federal level to overhaul, to re-engineer that. And
So
Obamacare
that's
didn't
mean
do it.
regulated. Need
Yeah,
to be regulated then.
yeah.
Yes.
Obamacare didn't do it, and nor did Clinton's approach. And again, not getting political, I'm just stating factual. Clinton was an Arkansan. He was our governor, and his approach to healthcare reform and the Affordable Care Act neither drove the impact that needs to occur to change the way healthcare is delivered.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, a lot of our listeners and viewers, they're going to watch this episode. They're going to be inspired, motivated, and driven, and get driven by your career, your path, your knowledge, your experience. What advice you would have to the fresh entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs who wants to take the same path as you or others?
Yeah. So what I tell people a lot of times is you don't have to figure out if you're a high school graduate getting ready to start college in the fall, or maybe you're a freshman or an undergraduate freshman, sophomore in college, or maybe you're getting ready to graduate college. You don't have to have your entire life figured out. I had one young lady who came to see me, and she said, "My mother said that I really needed to talk to you because I got to figure out my life because I'm graduating in 2 months." And I said, "Well, first thing I'm going to tell you is stop listening to your mother. I love your mom, but stop listening to her. The fact of the matter is, you're probably going to stay in your first job out of college 2 years or less. So go get a job in an area that you think you would enjoy working, and then pay attention to the things that you like to do and you're good at, and the things that you don't like to do and you're not good at, because in 18 to 36 months, you're going to get a second job. And in that job, you're going to be able to do more of what you love and you're good at, and less of what you don't love and you're not good at. And then another 18 to 36, maybe 48 months, you're going to get a third job. And it's okay for your career to evolve over time. The thing that I would tell them is failure's only failure if you quit. Otherwise, it's
Yes.
feedback. And so if you're having temporary setbacks, figure out what those temporary setbacks are telling you about your style, your approach, your strengths, your weaknesses, and use that as feedback to alter your approach.
Well said. Good advice. What's next for Jeff?
Well,
Uh, any
yeah.
new ventures? Anything you want to mention to talk about for our listeners of yours to look for?
Yeah, so I am made an investment in a small company recently that I'm excited about. That's in the AI space, and it's
Oh,
specifically geared for entrepreneurs and small business and leaders and or product managers of larger companies. It's called Oxygen, AUXIGEN, Oxygen, and it is a generative AI platform that has effectively trained the language models on 20 of the top business frameworks that are out there today to help nascent or fledgling businesses or product designers and product developers really, they can go in and put in a little bit of information about their company, their industry, their main
mm,
products and services, and then it will do the job of populating the first draft of some of those major business frameworks that they can then edit. It's got an edit capability that they can then edit to learn about how to take their business to market more rapidly, how to extend their products and services, what are the key performance indicators they need to be looking at for their particular business, how do they establish smart goals for their strategic growth plan to grow their business, et cetera. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm also excited about a new writing project I'm working on right now that's focused on how the pursuit of mental toughness and emotional intelligence together can really change everything. Most books that are written out there are about mental resilience or mental toughness, or the SEAL's guide to this or that, the Navy SEAL's guide to this or that, or they're written about emotional intelligence and how emotional intelligence is everything. And I'm bringing those two together in a book I'm calling Grit and Grace, how the pursuit of emotional intelligence and mental toughness changes everything. And so hopefully in 2025, I'll have that out. I'm pretty excited about that project.
amazing. Congrats. Amazing stuff coming out with
Thank you.
Jeff. Jeff, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, some of our listeners or viewers, for whatever reason, through LinkedIn or anywhere else you'd like to announce
Yes, sure.
or
I'd
mention.
love to connect with any of your listeners, Bob. It's always a pleasure to get feedback, both good and constructive. about a podcast episode or what I'm doing. Very active on LinkedIn. My handle is Jeff Standridge, just my first and last name, Jeff Standridge, or Jeff S at Innovation Junkie. That's Jeff and my first initial or my last initial, Jeff S at innovationjunkie.com, or my website is jeffstandridge.com as well. Love to connect with anyone who reaches out.
By the way, I'm intrigued about that company that you made an investment. You became part of it, Oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
It's really very timely. I like it. Very
Oxygen.ai, oxygen.auxigen.ai. I encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, I will. Oxygen.ai.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody and for myself, I will definitely. It really got me thinking. Thank you for joining us today on Innovate Presents Entrepreneurs in Tech. Be sure to connect with us on social media. Until next time, keep innovating, stay curious, think out of the box, and take care. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share Innovate Presents Entrepreneurs in Tech podcast. And if you're joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.